You know, Paramount Piglet did an article on DeviantArt, and they are basically one of the fans that's very passionate about the Sonic comics and the Sonic franchise, and pretty much are very opinionated when it comes to Ian Flynn, especially recently when Ian Flynn threw out the Twitter feed that he did towards the fans, I guess about his run on the IDW comic or something like that, and how certain characters were treated, hated, represented. And everybody has a right to their opinion. I'm not going to deny that they don't. But here's the thing. I think Ian Flynn and IDW and the creative team behind the Sonic comics should have expected some kind of backlash they should have expected some kind of backlash when it came to how these comics were presented, how these comics were introduced to us, especially when it came to certain characters being introduced and certain characters being represented the way they were. Because in the eyes of a lot of fans, when you take a look at, Amy Rose, for example, I think Sega Bits or someone on YouTube did a video where they talked about how in the IDW comics, it seems that Amy has become the new Sally. It's like basically it's like a Freaky Friday kind of deal. It's like Amy Rose was replaced by Sally Acorn. It's like Sally switched bodies. Like Sally switched souls, put her soul in Amy's body and Amy's soul in Sally's body or something like that. And basically the way she's presented in this comic, kind of showcases that, like how she's trying to get Sonic to join the Resistance and, be part of a team, stuff like that. Stuff that's very reminiscent of Sally. And then you take a look at the new character Tangle, the lemur, who has this ability with her tail to use her tail in any manner and kind of, I guess, shapeshift her tail into whatever she needs it to be. I don't know. And some people look at her as possibly being the Sally replacement, because the way you look at how she's designed and everything, some people, you can't blame people for feeling that could be the case, and she could be a potential love interest. And then you take a look at two new antagonists, I think Tough and Tumble or whatever the names are. They're basically the IDW interpretation of Bean and Bark. And a lot of fans have not taken too well to that, because it's like, well, wait a minute, if you're going, because, it's like, in the eyes of someone like Paramount Piglet and many others, it's like, if you're going to introduce these characters with these similar traits and everything to previous characters from the Archie comic, then why not just bring in the characters of the Archie comic? Why not just bring in Sally? Why not just bring in the Freedom Fighters? Why not just bring in Bean and Bark? And so on. Why not go and do that instead of introducing these new characters? And I once said this. The reason we have not seen the Freedom Fighters, but yet we will, is because they want to use this first initial year to bring in the gaming base, the fans of the gaming side of the Sonic franchise. They want to bring in the gaming fans of Sonic first, and then after they've done that and established the gaming fans to the comic, then they'll start to integrate maybe other elements from previous Sonic continuity into the IDW comic. Now, is that a smart move, perhaps? Maybe. Maybe not. You see, a lot of fans feel that, again, why wait? Like I said, a lot of fans look at how, they look at how these characters are presented and, personality-wise and, design-wise. And it's like, why not just bring in these characters anyway? Why do this? In fact, some people on DeviantArt have even done some fan art with Sally interacting with Tangle because of the freaking similarities. Because they know pretty much Tangle, in their opinion, is Sally IDW style. Now, as mentioned before, here's the thing. As mentioned before, they are not shutting the door on the freedom fighters. Like I said, what they want to do apparently is focus more on the new characters and introducing the gaming portion of the fan base to the comic more than the established fans of the Archie comic and Sonic Sat AM. That's what the primary focus is. As much as they should, like I said, as much as they should, focus on the fan base that helped make the Archie comic what it was, and basically allow IDW to pick up the rights to continuing the comic adventures. The primary focus now is look, we want to focus more on the gaming aspect, on the gaming fans, more than the established comic book fans and Sonic Sat AM fans, because my opinion, because from what I can tell, it seems like Ian Flynn wants to get as far away from what Archie Sonic was and try to create his own path when it comes to Sonic being in the comics. Now, no one can really blame somebody for wanting to do that, but still, when you take a look at the fact that even though, yes, the first 4 issues of the IDW run sold out to the point that they had to do reprints, still they should have expected this kind of outcry, this kind of controversy, these comparisons to come in like wildfire, in a sense. They should have expected that. They should have expected that, if we present Amy Rose like this a little bit, people are going to say, well, that's pretty much Sally. You've given her Sally's personality. Why didn't you just bring in Sally? Or they'll take a look at Tangle, the lemur, and say, hey, her design is similar to Sally's in a sense. Why didn't you bring in Sally? Why didn't you do that? That's how they're going to view it. And you can't blame fans for feeling like that. And I believe I've said this before, and I'll say it again. All IDW had to do when they got the license wasn't to decide to create an all-new comic and start from scratch. No. All IDW Comics had to do when they got the rights from Sega to continue the comic book adventures of Sonic, all they had to do was basically continue numerically, easy for me to say, pneumatically, the issues. That's all they had to do. They didn't have to worry about, what can we, how can we create a first issue and really start from scratch. No, they could have easily just said, look, we're going to continue where the Archie comic left off and go from there. I mean, if they didn't want to do Genesis of a Hero, fine. Don't worry about that, but it would have made sense to continue it anyway. Because that's pretty much the story arc the Archie book was in the middle of when the comic got canceled. I mean, there's a lot of fans nowadays that are continuing the adventures of the Archie Sonic comic through their own stories. Archie Sonic Online and Game Boy Sage, I think that's the name, along with a friend of theirs, is continuing basically post 247. That's what they're doing. I mean, a Sly Encounters Game Boy Sage and their friends' interpretation of what happened after 247, as well as be a crossover with Sly Cooper. The Sly Cooper franchise, that is. Archie Sonic Online is pretty much a straight-up continuation in their own version and their own adaptation of what happened post 247. As a matter of fact, as we speak, they are getting prepared to bring out, they are getting ready to release down the line their interpretation of issue 249. That's what they plan to do. They plan to release their own interpretation of issue 249, which they pretty much say is going to be the climax of the entire story arc. How they feel it could have gone down. And that was my neighbor's dogs barking at my dog. But anyway, like I was saying, Archie Sonic Online, people behind that are getting ready to release what they feel could have been, in their interpretation from the notes they've read and all that, what they feel could have been the climax to the entire Death Egg Mark II, World Tour II, Mecha Sally arc. That's what they're getting ready to present. They've already released 248, now they're getting ready to release 249. You see, a lot of fans want continuation. They wanted a continuation of the original storyline. Even if it was a soft retcon and reboot, they wanted a continuation. They didn't want a comic that just starts all over, or the first 4 issues being based off Sonic Forces, which some say is, basically a game, which some say is a game that's got it's kind of a mixed bag. It's got a mixed reaction. The point is when you take a look at how fans feel about this, in my opinion, the better solution would have been just to continue the comic as it was. Not to start over with an issue 1, 2, 3, and 4 and have them all released in 1 month. No, just continue on from where the original comic left off. Pneumatically continue on with issue, what were we at? 290, what was it? We were close to about, what was it, like 290, 291? Continue on with that. There's a lot of comics that have gone through this. In fact, the Walt Disney comics have done this, going through different publications, from Marvel, from their own publications, to Marvel, to now Boom Studios. Every publisher that they've been licensed under, including their own, has kept the numbering of the issues intact, including today. A lot of the Uncle Scrooge, Donald Duck, Mickey Mouse, you name it, those comics are still published pneumatically as if they were under the same publisher to begin with, but they've switched publications throughout the years. Heck, even books that have gone from Marvel to DC and DC to Marvel have done the same thing. Independent studios like Wildstorm, Top Cow, you name it, they probably have had, and no doubt probably did have, comic books that went back and forth between the publications, but never changed their numeral in their issues, or never started over. They just kept going as if nothing really changed. And IDW could have done that. IDW could have done that. But they didn't. IDW didn't. And IDW, which I think also does the Disney comics as well, I think they got that from Boom Studios, continues the numbering of the classic Disney comics as well. Just like Boom Studios did, now they do it. So they should take a lesson from what they're doing with Disney and apply that to Sonic. They should have taken a look what they're doing with the Disney comics, if they still have the license, and continue it. And if they don't, and they've passed it on to somebody else, which could have been Boom Studios again, who knows, the New Marine continues. Nothing changes except the publisher. And again, IDW basically could have learned from what they have done before with the Disney license. They could have done that, but they didn't. And to me, in my honest opinion, they could have avoided a lot of this. They could have avoided a lot of controversy, backlash, you name it. They could have avoided every part of that, but they didn't. They decided, you know what? Best idea, let's just start over from scratch, and let's focus primarily on trying to bring in the gaming fan base of Sonic, of the Sonic franchise, instead of just continuing off where the Archie comics left off, which would have made more sense. But again, if you want to put yourself in their shoes, you can kind of understand why they did it. They want to bring in the gaming fan base of the franchise first, get them established with the comic, get them intrigued and interested in the comic, not just with the characters they know, but maybe with a few new ones like Tangle and this Tough and Tumble, or whatever the name is. You know, get them familiar with them, and then maybe later on down the line, bring in characters like the Freedom Fighters. Because like I said earlier, they're not saying the door's shut on the Freedom Fighters, they're just holding off on them. Because they're waiting for a moment, they're waiting for the comic to fully integrate itself into everybody's subconscious. That's everybody that's a fan of Sonic, everybody's a fan of comic books in general. They're waiting for it to integrate into the subconscious of those people, mostly the gaming fans, before they bring in other characters from previous incarnations. But here's the thing. I still believe we're going to get an answer real soon. Whether we get an answer at San Diego Comic-Con next month, or whether we get an answer at New York Comic-Con later this year, we're going to get an answer. And I guarantee before this year's out, there will be an issue of the Sonic comic by IDW that's going to give us an Easter egg, a reference, or even a freaking silhouette of Sally Acorn and Bunny Rabbit and mostly the Freedom Fighters. But you're going to get a silhouette of one, if not all of them, or a reference or something like that to all of them, or an acknowledgement that they exist, and that by next year, I can almost feel this. As we enter the 1 year anniversary of the IDW Sonic comic, that's when you'll start probably seeing them popping up into the comic. That's when they'll become staples of the comic and regular characters of the comic. I can almost feel that's what's going to happen. You know, Ian Flynn and the creative staff behind the comic may say, well, it's going to take time. It's not going to be right away. I think it will be, and I think Ian Flynn knows it's going to be. I think he does. You know, he could, like I said, he could stand there and you know, he can get on his keyboard, go on Twitter and say, hey, this ain't going to happen. You're hearing wrong, da-da-da. Ian Flynn knows, whether you like Ian Flynn or you don't, he and this creative staff know what they're doing. And they know when to pull the trigger. And right now, they're just waiting on their hands in anticipation to make the announcement that yes, the Freedom Fighters will show up. That yes, this is when you can expect maybe a reference or a silhouette of them to show up in the IDW comic. And more importantly, they're waiting on their hands and knees to tell you what the month and date, and what the month of next year, or what part of next year, I should say, that they will debut. It only makes sense, folks. It only makes sense that a year after that, the IDW Sonic premieres, that they go this route. And more specifically, if they want to help hype up the Sonic movie, which is coming, then this is the best way to do it. You give the fans what they want, and you give them the Freedom Fighters next year to help build towards that movie. And I think that's what they're doing. They're waiting until that moment. Like I said, they're not going to tell you right away, oh yeah, this is going to happen. No, they're waiting. They're waiting on their hands until either San Diego or New York to make the announcement. And I almost have this feeling, I don't know why, I almost have this feeling that before this year's out, one of the final issues of 2018, you're going to get a reference, an acknowledgement, if not a freaking silhouette of all those characters, if not primarily Sally Acorn. And then by the time we reach next year, in the 1-year anniversary, and to help build up to the movie, we will see the debut of the Freedom Fighters in the IDW comic. It's almost a guarantee in my opinion. I could be wrong, but I feel it's almost a guarantee that's going to happen. But honestly, in closing, I will say this. Everybody will have their opinion on how they feel the comic is doing. Everybody will have their opinion on how they feel about Ian Flynn's run with the comic and how they feel about him. But I stand by what I said. I think this all could have been avoided had they just numeratically continued the story and continued the story off, or continued the story arc from Archie Comics, but just under the IDW license. I think a lot of this could have been avoided had they done that. So, had they numeratically just continued the comic from Archie Comics, and with the only change being the publisher, and then in parentheses, the number, in parentheses, putting issue 1 in parentheses under the actual numeric number of maybe 292 or 291. It would have made more sense. It would have helped avoid a lot of this backlash and controversy and whatever. I think that's what they should have done. But that's just my opinion. But let me know what you guys think down below. Comment if you like. Hopefully you take your time in listening to this. And I'll talk to y'all later.